If you love Push Black's Black History Year, you'll love our newest podcast called 2 Minute Black History. In only 2 minutes, you'll hear little-known stories about our people and reclaim the knowledge we need to take action and advance our community. To move towards the future, you've got to look to the past. Learn the history you didn't get in school. Tune in to 2 Minute Black History every Tuesday through Friday, right on the Black History Year feed and wherever you listen to podcasts.
Take a moment. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself living your vision of Black liberation. However you envision it, immerse yourself in a world where you can feel, taste, touch, and live your idea of liberation. Now, what if I told you there's a way to make that vision a reality? A virtual reality. I'm Jay from Push Black, and you're listening to Black History Year. The rise of technology is fundamentally transforming society as we know it. Advancements in tech touch every aspect of life, and for better or worse, the past 2 decades have seen rapid innovations such as surgery-assisting robots in medicine, interactive voice response apps in education, and AI-powered facial recognition systems in policing. But it doesn't stop there. Immersive technologies that were once only imagined in science fiction are now giving people the ability to suspend reality and create entire worlds in virtual space. It sounds like something from an Octavia Butler novel, and true to the genre, it raises ethical questions on advanced technology's social, political, and cultural impact on humanity and Black life. To explore these ideas, we're sitting down with Alton Glass. He is a filmmaker, visionary, entrepreneur, and founder of GRX Immersive Labs, where he leads a team of new media gurus tackling contemporary issues through immersive storytelling. He's also the co-creator of Time Magazine's The March, which is an immersive installation on the 1963 March on Washington. And his latest project, POV, Points of View, is a sci-fi VR series that explores the impact of implicit bias on artificial intelligence and law enforcement practices. He's filling an important gap in this white-dominated field and bringing our stories to life in XR. Alton and I are going to get into the good, the bad, and the future of artificial intelligence and what can come from immersing ourselves in Black virtual realities. But before this enlightening interview, let's immerse ourselves in a history story that could easily pass as a virtual fable. It's about why some people think Black people can fly. Stay tuned.
There are traces of this particular tale about our people in movies, books, art, music, and even bedtime stories. But where exactly did the notion that Black people could fly away actually come from? And why has this myth, this virtual reality, persisted for so long? Our apparent ability to fly is traced to a true story about Igbo Landing, a historic site in Georgia where Africans on a slave ship, rather than face enslavement, drowned their captors and then themselves. White historians considered this occasion a tragic mass suicide, but our people have another interpretation. Instead of the Africans drowning at sea, the story goes that they flew back to Africa. Some enslaved Africans in the Americas would say their loved ones flew away to heaven, while some would say they flew to freedom. The lore was passed down over the ages through oral history, each generation with its own version. We also see the story in our literature and art, including Toni Morrison's classic novel, Song of Solomon. We read about it in children's books and in folktales. But unlike the white interpretations of the story that end in sadness, our stories always end in freedom and celebration. Our narrative understands that the tale of Igbo landing elevates acts of rebellion and liberation. The courage our people showed at Igbo landing continues to inspire. When we control the narrative and choose to honor our ancestors, we use their sacrifices to teach and find joy in our Blackness.
Alton Glass, welcome to Black History Year. Appreciate you joining us today. We're going to start this like we do each one of these with the most important question being, what does Black liberation look like to you?
For me, it's just, freedom to express yourself in any way you would like, whether it's your voice or your creativity, your business, you bring your identity to a space, to and be unapologetic about that, not feeling like you have to dim your light for anyone else to really show your excellence and who you are.
Expression, creativity, really shining as bright as we can. How do you advance that vision through the work that you do?
Well, it took me a while to get my sort of founder market fit, as they would call it, right? In an aspect of my business, which is really designed around, empowering individuals to take, their unique perspective and their skills and develop transferable skills to move that in new spaces. And I do that through virtual reality, augmented reality, or what people call XR, immersive storytelling, and combine that with creative entrepreneurship so that, even if you don't want to start a business, at least learning how to think like one, we can start to have impact in the areas that we're really passionate about. And we do that through GRX Immersive Labs, which is, immersive storytelling and education technology enabled platform for learning. And my background as a storyteller, I really believe in the power of the narrative. And I think the first and most important story you ever tell is a story you tell yourself. And I think if you can empower yourself through that means, you can continue to do that with others. And that's what we aim to do.
Storytelling, something that Black folks have been engaged in for thousands and thousands of years, right? And so storytelling is a way to transmit information, beliefs, values, also just entertainment and connecting with one another. How are you viewing storytelling from a historical standpoint, specifically as it relates to Black folks?
I definitely would lean on Oscar Micheaux. I mean, as one of the early pioneers in storytelling for, the Black community and being able to get those messages out independently. I really believe and continue to understand how to craft and control the narrative. And then I really have a passion for entrepreneurship and education, so from the Madam C.J. Walkers who, lived by example and let that narrative, take its course. And then Carter G. Woodson on the educational side of constantly, refining and honing your craft and educating yourself. So I like to, lean on those individuals in Black history and tap into that resilience in my DNA and bring our own perspective to that in the current times that we live in.
Those some heavy hitters there for sure. Curious if there's either one or all three that you could dive into a bit in terms of that influence. Tell me a bit more about the influence of one or all three of those folks as relates to you and your work.
Yeah, it's interesting because growing up and no discredit to school or anything I went to, but we were raised to learn about what they consider the 9-word problem, where you learn about Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, Rosa Parks, right? So I didn't really get a chance to get in depth with a lot of these other Black pioneers in various areas of history until I was much older. And that really started to really help shape my narrative and my thought process. And, I would say Carter G. Woodson, the miseducation of the Negro, that really helped me understand, how education and storytelling really have a big influence on the way we see ourselves and the way people see us as well. And also Booker T. Washington, where, he really believed in educating the hands, heart, and the mind of individuals. And that's really what turned a light bulb on for me. And then adding on the entrepreneurship aspects of understanding how to solve problems of your community and create, opportunities for yourself and your community, where Madam C.J. Walker, her story was, amazing to see how they were able to do that type of work and amass that type of wealth by solving those problems and building products for a community or a market that people often overlook. So with that, we take that and we say, okay, now how do we look inward, right? Sort of an entrepreneurship perspective to tap into how they handled and leverage the times, and how do we use that lens today to create and innovate.
I can absolutely relate, especially as it concerns Carter G. Woodson and Booker T. Washington, and miseducation of the Negro was, I think, monumental in my life and my understanding of Black history and what they want us to believe versus what we should understand, and using that to advance ourselves. So I appreciate you sharing that. So identify for us, with the work that you're doing, what problem is the community facing that you are looking to solve?
Well, I can't pinpoint, every community, because every community has their own things that they really want to tackle and identify. But I would say from a broader perspective, what we do is through our storytelling, we find, I would say, for example, we did a project called POV, Points of View. We showcased at Tribeca, and now we license and we showcase in various different types of institutions. But that project was about artificial intelligence and implicit bias, and how artificial intelligence and emerging technologies can impact marginalized communities, right, that are already adversely affected. So we wanted to use a narrative and a story that showcases a young, gifted Black coder named Cassius, about 21, going to college, and he makes a mistake by not necessarily understanding all the ramifications of using certain technologies, and he goes to prison and for biometric hacking. And in order to get out in the future, due to mass incarceration, things that we know that it currently exists, instead of giving him an ankle bracelet, they let him out on early release under the condition of being assigned to an artificially intelligent weaponized drone. And you see how this new form of like an ankle bracelet sort of probation officer, how they learn from each other. This AI is being trained behind the scenes in law enforcement, but also how he's learning to have a relationship with this technology from a lens where he's understanding it and understanding how to use it and leverage it for the benefit of himself and his community. And we want to use those types of projects to bring awareness to AI, implicit bias, law enforcement technologies, and just overall awareness of emerging tech literacy, civic technologies, and community engagement around these topics to bring discourse and conversation, because one, it might spur awareness for the opportunities to participate in the space, right, which we really believe in, on the the job opportunities, the entrepreneurship opportunities, the education opportunities, and then as well as engaging in your community to make sure that you won't be adversely affected by these things, should these new laws pop up or new technologies pop up in your community. Like, we've seen the robo dogs in New York that they're starting to, showcase, how do we get ahead of those things and understand how we either partake in them or how we prevent, being the ones that are, getting the short end of the stick, in a sense.
And this is done through virtual reality, correct?
So that's done through initially through virtual reality, but we make sure that the content we create is accessible in various different formats. So whether it be desktop, mobile, augmented reality, we try to make sure that it has various touch points for um, just about anyone to experience the content that we create and the interactive content. And the way we try to open up, we use that as an opener to now thinking about critically now what's happening in your community, that you can now start to think about, and who are you going to be bothering for? So we share what we do, and then we get them to think critically about, okay, now what do you see in your community that you can now tackle, and how can you bring your unique perspective and your DNA to solving this particular problem or issue?
And that's interesting because, one of the things that we really value at Push Black is our ability to engage the community in advancing their own interests, right? Because you all so often have folks coming from outside or approaching things with a top-down perspective, where it's like, people think they know what's best, but the folks who are closest to the issues likely have the best solutions more often than not. So it sounds like you're also taking that approach in terms of participation, both addressing these issues and inviting participation in problem solving. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. Yeah, because we often want to give somebody a vision, right, for themselves, but we have to understand, like, what is it that they need and what they want, what they desire, and then how do you empower them with the tools to activate on that?
Absolutely. We've identified that for thousands of years, we've been telling stories as humans, as Black folks specifically, through word of mouth, through visual, through dance. You mentioned a show with film. As far as the technology goes, what makes this particular story you're describing, the points of view, why should it be told in AR as opposed to a film or a painting or, dance?
I would say two reasons. One, it's a interactive, experiential sort of medium, right? It also introduces various communities to these new emerging technologies for those who want to get under the hood and learn a bit about that aspect as well. And then last, it allows us to give you an opportunity to experience with bringing your body into the frame and being in that environment, right? And actually giving you a firsthand experience into, what this near future could not only look like, but feel like. And I think that's the power and what I really love about immersive and interactive storytelling.
And just for our audience, many of which may or may not be familiar with this, could you distinguish between these different technologies? You mentioned immersive, so VR, AR. What are we actually talking about here? If you could sum it up briefly.
Yeah, so as a whole, you will hear the term XR or extended reality, which is a all-encompassing sort of catchphrase for virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality. And virtual reality is, taking you and putting you inside a environment, 3D generated environment, or it could be 360, video, right, where you're seeing all around you, up and down, right. And then you have augmented reality, which is assets overlaid over your environment, but you still get to see your current environment. And then you have mixed reality, which is probably a little bit more closer to like what you're starting to hear about, like Apple glasses, right, where you'll be able to have a mix of the environment and be able to engage with like a touchscreen UI over your world, kind of like Minority Report. It's sort of a combination between AR and MR.
Would you describe this as just like an addition to the many forms of, media consumption we already have, or is this like the future?
With the internet, I believe that we're moving into a sort of a spatial browser environment where, you once were just in your computer, but now you'll be able to put on eyeglasses that, may not at some point look like, these larger lenses, and be able to, see billboards and advertisements and do wayfinding over your glasses. So we will get there at some point. It's just a matter of like, how fast will the technology evolve in terms of the size, and the form factor for everyday use cases. But I feel like, platforms like Apple, they're probably only one step away from really being able to give you something that you could, wear every day and that integrates with the desktop that's in your phone, overlaid over your everyday environment.
You're obviously deep into this. Is this a space where Black folks have a heavy presence?
I think it's grown since I started in it. I got in it about 7-8 years ago, and when I went to my first VR Expo, I probably met a handful of African Americans, Black folks in the business, and it really made me start to do more research on what this industry was and what it could be and where it was going. And then when I started doing research and seeing the billions of dollars being invested in this business, I was like, where will we be 7 or 5 or 10 years from now in these spaces? And that's what prompted me to dig deep and start this. And back then it wasn't many, but now I've seen a lot more in this space. Now in relationship to the overall general market, no, we still have a long way to go in that space. But I also believe that, we also know that we bring the cool factor, we bring the it factor, and I don't think it will work without bringing that unique, diverse perspective and ideals that will really take it to the next level. The interesting thing about, immersive media or VR or whatever it is, in that realm, you have to have some form of creative entrepreneurship because you're carving out lanes that don't necessarily exist. You're finding ways to make the technology useful or impactful in certain areas, not just creatively, but technically, and also opportunities to use it in spaces that we may not have thought of. So I think that's the beauty of it, and you're starting to see people create things to sort of fall in those and create those riches in the niches, and that's what it's going to take. Building worlds that other people can identify with, and building communities around it.
This world building and this community building aspect is really interesting to me because I'm of the belief that we're currently living in a world that we did not create, and therefore the odds are stacked against us. And it seems that with this emerging technology, there's opportunity to have more of a hand in world building, especially, if it ends up being something where like this is the world people primarily exist in, this meaning, this immersive world. What are your thoughts on that notion and the opportunity that exists there for Black folks to have a hand in world building and creating a space that looks more like a liberated and a just space from the very beginning?
I definitely agree with you. We did build this current ecosystem in which we live in, but we just didn't have, like you said, the input where it was beneficial, right, for us in the long run. But I think that
built the infrastructure, but didn't necessarily lay the plans. Yeah,
correct. Yeah. So I feel like off the sweat and labor, right, in the creativity, right, but we may not have always gotten the rewards, right. And I think now we have an opportunity to say, hey, how do we approach this differently, and how do we design the future, right, through a combination of storytelling, which is, you're crafting and you're designing what that is going to look like, what that's going to feel like, and then leveraging that technology to start to build these worlds so that not only will they inform us of what the future will be like, and we can experience that, and we can bring ourselves into that, but now how do we now make that digital manifestation a physical manifestation, so that they can start to be built together. And I think if we we have to do that, because if we don't, the same thing is going to happen where someone's going to build, you're going to be a part of participating in something that's being built for you in the future that you won't partake in any fruit of it, but you'll be a consumer of it. And it'll be what someone thinks you want versus what you want.
I'm curious though about the cost of entry, both from the creator side and from the just consumer side. I would assume that there is an economic reason, in addition, I'm sure, other reasons why Black folks are not necessarily as heavy in it as we probably should be when it comes to setting the foundations for this world.
I would say 7, 8 years ago when I first started, it was definitely a very high barrier to entry, which is one of the reasons that really prompted me to move into the space, because fortunately I had the resources to at least start to chip away at it. Coming from having my own production company in film and television, those resources allowed me to really dig in and open up some doors. But I would say now it's gotten a lot more cost effective and a lot more touch points, a lot more things you can leverage to participate in this space. And it is a lot more cost effective than it was. Because, now if you're thinking about not just VR, but your ecosystem as a whole of how you tell a story, how you create your experience, and you're thinking about making that cross-platform, you can build it one brick at a time until you get to the more hardware intensive or costly aspects of your project. But it doesn't have to stop you now with all the resources and some of the automated processes that they have now, even down to when I started 360 video, you had to stitch or edit all of those multiple cameras together and learn how to do everything from scratch. But now they have these really cool, cameras like Insta360, talking about $200, $300. I've even, bought things off, offer up at discounted prices. I remember working with a young man. He wanted to get into VR, and I said, hey man, Best Buy has a return policy. It's 14 days. Go check out the camera, see if you like it, go shoot something. And if you like it, you get the money to keep it. If you don't, take it back. And he went and shot a great project, and and then the client ended up paying him to go buy the camera. So, it was only $500, but so for some that could be a lot of money, for some it can't be. But for him at that time, he had the resources to get the camera, but he didn't have the resources to keep it until he shot that project, and then said, okay, now they're going to pay me to keep this camera. So, he put the effort and the time to learning it and making it happen, and an opportunity opened up for him. He didn't let that barrier stop him,
So it sounds like at one point there was a high price. Now I'm sure like the high end stuff is still high end, but there's ways to get in the game.
Oh yeah, I remember when I first started, I was trying to get my hands on to do a screening, and I needed 10 headsets. And I went on these websites, people who might have bought them, or back then they were raffling them off. So I remember I stumbled upon a young guy, people were raffling them off, and they were like, I'm not going to necessarily use it, but I'll sell it. I was buying them half price. Some of them I was buying refurbished, and I was able to get them, do my screenings, charge for my screening experiences. So, and then now they have companies that rent the hardware too. So there's another opportunity to say, okay, if I don't want to, buy it all, maybe I can, work with a company, and I can, get a client to say, hey, I want to put this project together, showcase this, and here's my rental costs, or go to partners and say, hey, you make this hardware, can you provide some loaners? When I did my first one at American Black Film Festival, we had about, I think, 100 headsets, and that wouldn't have been cost effective for me. But I reached out to Samsung, found out they had a loaner program, and they gave us the headsets, and we showcased it at American Black Film Festival in Miami with 75 people synced up in the movie theater watching VR. Who would have imagined we would have been able to do that, in 2016, 2017, right? That was probably, probably $100,000 worth of phones back then, right? But there are organizations and companies that, you know, are resourceful and have these resources. You just got to, figure out means of connecting with those organizations, because it is opportunities there.
That's great. So for folks listening that want to tap into this technology and bring it to their communities, and even bring some of your works to their communities, there's ways to do that.
We have inventory, and we have inventory partnerships. So if you're like, hey, we've partnered with schools and nonprofit organizations, different businesses, and say, hey, okay, you want to host a screening or an experience, how many do you want to serve? How many throughput do you want to get? And then we will help you, get those resources, from the hardware to showcase it to the hardware to go out and create it. We assist with that as well. And we also, offer training materials for that as well. So we try to make it as turnkey as possible so that people don't have the issues that we had when we first started in the business.
I'm really curious just around this idea of being immersed in our history. I describe that feeling for you, both as a creator and someone is experiencing what you created.
Growing up, I only learned about Martin Luther King, in school, and I really only learned about the very basic, aspects of his life, and we learned about the same thing pretty much every year, right? And I had the opportunity to co-create a project with my creating partner on that, named Mia Tram. She was head of Immersive at Time Magazine, or Time Studios. They did a project called The March, and it was executive produced by Viola Davis and Julius Tennant's company, and a company called Digital Domain, where they do like virtual humans like Thor and all those high-end like digital humans and visual effects. So I had the opportunity to combine, storytelling, some amazing, technologies and visual effects to recreate the 1963 March on Washington, where, over 200,000 people came together, for a purpose. And it was great because working with Time, had the opportunity to do a lot of research and really learn about all the nuances and the details of how the march came together, and then really dive into the details of the time period itself, from scanning the clothes, scanning all the props of that time period. And scanning just means, you take a 3D, you convert all of those real world assets into 3D objects that you can put into the game engine, which was called Unreal Engine. And then we do motion capture, which is put the people in the suits with the little dots on the body, and then they do all the motions and the animations and walking cycles. And then the biggest part of that was working with the King Estate and his kids, to recreate a 3D rendering of him that's photoreal. And if you ever look up the cover of the Time magazine, you Google like the Time March BTS or something like that, you'll see the cover of Time magazine is a photo of him. It looks like a photo, but it's actually a 3D rendering of him from inside the virtual reality experience. And it's just an incredible image of how we were able to, recreate that to the detail through emerging technologies that we have today. And one thing I loved about it was you had a chance to go through this full experience. It's actually an exhibit that started off at the DeSable Museum in Chicago, which is the oldest African-American museum here. And that's where we wanted to be the birthplace of the project launch. And you go through this, sound experience. We interview, people from the Birmingham, riots and the freedom rides that survived that. And you get this, sound experience, and you get their voices, and they're talking about all the things that they had to go through and deal with, and why they pushed through that time period to get to the march that brought together over 200,000 people. And then you actually, Viola Davis, she does the voiceover and carries you through the experience where you're actually marching with the energy of over 200,000 people side by side, regardless of race, or ethnicity or religion, but it's about humanity. and you get that energy. We recorded all of some of the choir and the music of that time with a live choir, and you get that full energy of people walking by you and that energy of people there with all the details of the real march. And then finally at the end, you know, you move throughout the mall where they had the Lincoln Memorial, and you get an opportunity to get up close and personal with Dr. King. So for me, growing up watching him and then being able to go inside his experience and then see him up at this podium deliver the I Have a Dream speech, you know, it was really powerful. And then having him look at you and give you your own call to action and really think about, you know, like, now what are you going to do with your light and your purpose? It was really touching. And when I was at the exhibit, seeing people come out who might have actually, either their parents might have attended it, or they might have been, you know, kids, or they might have seen it, you know, broadcast. People came out of that experience, you know, crying, and they were reaching out, trying to touch him. So it just showed you how, you know, surreal, or how your mind really made you feel like you were there.
Wow. That sounds powerful. I'm looking forward to being able to experience it at some point. So appreciate your work on that and bringing that to life. You know, it's amazing how this technology is allowing us the ability to tap in with our ancestors in amazing ways as we're looking at the problems that largely face our community, largely talking about racism, white supremacy, lack of access, economic resources, the big problems that we're facing. How can we be thinking about using this technology to solve either those, or just on a micro community or interpersonal level, right? What does this open up a door for in terms of us addressing the things that we face on a day-to-day? And then what do we need to be careful about when it comes to this technology and some of the risks involved?
I would say first, in terms of risk, you know, always just understanding how to, you know, do everything in moderation. You know, technology can definitely be a little addictive and take you down different roads and paths that may not be as healthy for you. But I think, you know, understanding the responsibility and the ethics behind using these technologies is first. And then not getting bogged down with the distractions, like you talk about white supremacy and other things. Like, you want to be careful, but we have to put our energy towards, you know, collectively creating and building, right? It's almost like when people say, be aware and understand your competition, but move forward and focus on creating. And I think that, you know, for me, growing up and giving so much attention to the people who didn't want to see me or my community succeed, you know, there are people who are going to do that work, and I think they do need to combat that. And then there are people that need to be on other fronts, so that we can sort of divide and conquer, in a sense, where we're working in various different areas, but communicating, okay, how do we leverage all these unique things, with these things that we're creating, designing, building, and how do they become tools to alleviate some of those pain points. But I think overall we have to really focus on what we're going to build that's going to be sustainable. And I think, you know, getting into this space and understanding some of the things that you want to tackle first, and problems you want to solve, and learning about some of the tools will start to inform you on the opportunities in the space. Like, I even think, like, even libraries to me are great places for transformation and innovation, right? You know, those are great spaces to build, and, you know, those to me are the future of the, you know, the innovation labs in certain communities, right? You got access to Wi-Fi, you got access to knowledge and information, and you got community. And you know, maybe dropping in some of these tools in your local community, saying, hey, we want to get a few VR headsets, we want to get some phones or some iPads in there. You know, building resources there for people to do courses and classes and train and create. And I think those are good hubs. And then your local, you know, schools and nonprofits coming together to plant these seeds and build that community. They have the Octavia Butler lab in LA. Really dope lab. A lot of people might not know about it, right? But they got 3D printers in there. I mean, they got computers. They got VR. They got green screens. I mean, it's the future, right?
Appreciate you mentioning that. It's so underrated. 8 years ago, when we were building Push Black, I remember going to the library to send out, a broadcast to hundreds of thousands of folks because I didn't have internet access where I was at. But I went to the library, made it happen. So incredible things can be done by tapping into your community's resources. So I appreciate you sharing that. Alton Glass, thank you for joining us on Black History Year.
Thank you.
That was Alton Glass, founder of GRX Immersive Labs. To learn more about the innovative work he and his team of creators are doing, or to bring his technology to your community or organization, visit www.grximmersive.com or find him on Instagram at GRX Immersive Labs. At Push Black, we agree with Marcus Garvey when he said, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." We believe telling empowering stories on Black life and history can build a more liberated Black future. Being here with us lets us know you probably feel like that's important too. You matter. Your choice to be here matters. It lets us know that you value this work. And you make Push Black happen with your contributions at blackhistoryyear.com. Most people do $5 or $10 a month, but really, everything makes a difference. Thank you for supporting the work. Black History Year is a production of Push Black, the nation's largest nonprofit Black media company. Our team includes Tariq Alani, Brooke Brown, Tasha Taylor, Somalia Ramin, Amber Davis, and Darren Wallace. Producing this episode, we have Sydney Smith and Lynn Webb for Push Black, and Ronald Young Jr., who also edits the show. Black History Year's executive producers are Lily Workna and me, Julian Walker. Peace.